Hi everybody, I'm Sarah Gibson and I'm back with a new project breakdown. Today I'm going to be talking all about this piece. Okay, so I'm going to start with an overview of this whole project and then I'm going to dive into some questions I was asked about it. Let's get this started. Okay, so for those who don't know what AIGA is, it is the American Institute of Graphic Arts. That's what it stands for. But it has expanded and it's really just a collection of all sorts of designers and artists. I've been a member for, I guess, getting close to a decade now, and I've been on the board for now. I'm in my 4th year on the board. Currently, I am their creative director, which means I make stuff. In this case, promoting that we had board elections. This happened over the summer, around the time that I went freelance, and I took this as kind of an opportunity to show off. So I started with this illustration first, and as you can see, none of the shading is in here yet. That is because I exported it out, and if you don't know how to do this, I'll do this real quick. You go to File, Export, Export As, and you can export as a Photoshop document. You can use your artboards. Sure, I'll say export. And you can write layers. So all the layers that you have in your Illustrator file will then be saved as layers for a Photoshop file. So if I zoom out, you can see that I actually did all of these in one artboard, or one file, 5 artboards. And then I exported them out into Photoshop, and then this is where I added in the shading. Now, if you didn't know this and you're in your brush, you can do a dissolve mode. So if I just make, let's do something crazy, front hand. Let me grab a new layer. And I'm holding down Alt. This will create a clipping mask, so it will only show up on the front hand. And I've got a purple selected. And you can see that it's all staying in that very dissolve-y kind of pixelated shading. So that's how I did the shading. There are a lot of layers in this file. I've got the nails, highlights here, highlight on the hand, the shadow, and there's the Illustrator layer itself. So that's the general process of how I did the illustrations. So after I did all the illustrations and I made these versions, which I used for squares, for social posts, as well as like all these different sizes for the website, for Facebook, so many different sizes. I made versions of all of the hands and all those different sizes. And I had made these at a very large resolution. I think I exported at 300 just so that way I could have really fine control and zoom in when I was doing the shading. And then I, of course, saved them down so they lose some of their detail. But they're there. And then I thought it would be a lot of fun to make this an animation. So I did. So before I could animate all of the hands, I first had to set them up for rigging. And this is what I did. So you can see that I have a lot of guides going on. And all of these ones layered on top are all for the fingers directly behind the pointer finger. And there's actually, well, there's 3 joints per finger. And there's actually 2 separate 3 layers for each finger. Does that make sense? So I've got like the top layer, which is the fill, which is just the fills, and then I have back layers for each one that are the strokes. And I set it up that way because this allows me to rig it with Duik, if you're familiar with Duik, and also keep a nice solid black outline happening. So if let's jump into After Effects and let's go to hand 1. And let me hide all my keyframes. And if I unshy all the layers, you're gonna see so much happening here. Yeah, over 100 layers for one hand, and things get wonky at the very beginning. But if I go forward, so you can see that there's stroke layers, and what I did was I actually parented all the stroke layers to their counterpart that doesn't have a stroke. So I only had to rig the layers, the top layers, the ones that weren't the stroke. But then I also had to rearrange the strokes to be directly under their corresponding layers, although not directly underneath each one, just staggered. So all the ring fills are first, and then all the ring strokes are next. All the mids are first, and then all the mid strokes are next. And that's how I arranged them to get the seamless outline that can also break a little bit, which gives that nice little kind of outline, like breaking in the illustration kind of line happening here. Sorry, my dog is very happy. He just got some good treats, so he's playing right now, and I'm just gonna keep going. All right, so that's generally how I set up the hands. Now I guess we can go ahead and talk about the shading. So to achieve this kind of shading with the noise texture, it's actually this file, most of them. I kind of cheated and I did it once, and then I just duplicated it over and over again, sizing it how I need it just to make this process faster. So I created this in Photoshop, and it's 5 layers. If I turn off the background layer, and each one is just slightly different using that same dissolve technique with the brush. So that's how I built it. Then I imported that into After Effects, keeping all of the layers separate. So I brought it in as a comp, and then I made each layer 4 frames long and then staggered them one after another. Then if I press U, you'll see that there's a time remap, and that was from the beginning of the comp to the end of the comp, and it's just a looped. So the texture, if I that, and I'll isolate it, and will it let me? No, it's not gonna let me see it. But that's how we get that texture that's not animating every single frame, it's just animating every 4 frames, which gives that very specific kind of noisy, textury look, which I really like. So this is actually a technique that Ben Marriott covers in a tutorial of his, and I'll link that in the description. He has easier ways of doing it. This is one of the techniques he covers, but yeah, there is easier ways to do it, but of course I'm a masochist, and I did it this way because I wanted very specific control and I wanted a very specific look, and this was the only way to achieve that. So don't do what I do and make things harder on yourself, but I'm still happy with it, so it's all right. After I rigged up the first hand and got all the shading layers done, I think I actually might have animated it first and then gone in and add the shading. So this is the comp. Since I knew I was going to make story versions of each hand animating as well as post versions, I made this comp, and I believe, yep. So it's almost 2000 by 2000 pixels. So it's 1920 by 1920. I knew that would cover all sizes. Yeah, so each hand animation was less than 10 seconds long. So I did each one individually in the same size. All right, I think the next thing I should cover is how I made the ballot box. So let's dive into that. So here's the main ballot box, and there's actually a really great post on Instagram, which I'll link into the description, that covers how to make this really well. Come on, hide everything. Okay, so they're all vector square layers, and they're all 3D, and that allowed me to position them in, and then in each animation ballot box they're also 3D here, so this allows me to still move them. So here, like, so I'm moving it in 3D space, and that's how I get that nice little turn. It just creates some really nice movement. For the shadow, I had to animate that by hand, I believe. There's shadow. Yeah, so. But the beauty of this, since all of the boxes enter the same way, after I did it once, I didn't have to do it again. So I just animated the shadow by hand and added in the texture, which is what Shadow 2 is clipping. Yeah, so okay, we're gonna go ahead and build a box together real quick. So I'm gonna make a new composition, and let's just go to one view for now, and let's make a new solid, and let's make it square. This is gonna be different from my Balax box because they were rectangular. So this is gonna be 400 by 400, and let's go ahead and make it that mustard color. So there it is. Let's make it 3D. Let's also collapse transformations. And we are going to then, let's now hop back into two views, and this one, I'll do custom view 2. No, custom view 3, I think is the one I like. Yeah, so let's call this front, and I'm going to use one of my favorite tools, Motion V2 by Mount MoGraph, just for quickly switching my anchor point. So then I can duplicate this, and we'll call this right, and in rotation we'll rotate it 90 degrees. I'm gonna bring front in front. Now we're gonna duplicate front again, and this one will be left, and let's move the anchor point to the other side and rotate this one negative 90 degrees. All right, you can see we're getting to a box already. Okay, then let's duplicate the front again, and this one we'll call bottom, and let's move the anchor point to the bottom, and we'll rotate that negative 90 degrees. And now let's do the top. And rotate this. $90 degrees. Perfect. Now we just need to do the back. We can do that. Let's just duplicate the bottom. Call this one back. Move the anchor point to the other side, and do this with negative 180. And now we've got a box, but we don't have those nice strokes. So to do that, we add a stroke. I'm going to generate a stroke. All right, So the stroke isn't showing up because we need to add a mask. To add a mask, just double click the square shape tool. It'll make a mask that exact size. Then click all masks on original image. There we go. Now if I don't solo that, and let's make it much smaller. Let's make it like back to 2 now. 5. Alright, so there's a stroke there. And we're gonna have to do the same with all of the other ones. So if I select all this, let's pre-compose as box. Now if I go into one view, back to camera, let's make that 3D, and now we can just rotate it all over the place, but it's not rotating from the center, it's rotating from the front. So to fix that, let's grab the anchor point tool and then let's move it back, and let's keep checking. Yeah, that looks like it's about center, so let's go back here and let's go back to rotating it. There we go. Now it's rotating from the center of the box. And then how I animated like my squash, it was just, you know, unclicking the link all of the sizes, so that way that allowed me to squash it. Yep, so that is how you make a 3D box in After Effects. So now you have the general idea of how I rigged the hands, how I made the box, how I animated all that stuff. You have the general idea of how that all worked. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about the main piece, because I knew I wanted to make a main big piece, like less than a minute long, and I knew I wanted it to have music and stuff because none of the other ones had any audio with them. I didn't dive that deep. I mean, it was a lot making 5 of these animated hands and making the shorts. I mean, it took me a few weeks because, you know, I'm also balancing work. And so I had the music chosen and I kind of just pieced it together, and there's certain ones I made that were custom, like this is a custom, the rock hand, this I'd already done and just put it there, that had already been done, this was custom because I thought this was a fun kind of interstitial, as I mostly stay in the blue world, but then I switch the background color on different parts, like there, the box revealing itself, just hanging out, and then, you know, a big 2020, and the hands high-fiving, and then all the election ballots kind of falling, and then this was custom where I kind of stitched together a bunch of the different hands, dropping it in and kind of piecing it together. And then after that, it was all basically all new stuff, and I just started thinking about, well, what can hands do? And so I then thought of, you know, the Addams Family and the hand that just is a disembodied hand that does things. I'm like, well, I could like have it walking, and then I thought I should have the board election like ballot in all of these little things where, you know, so I got the hand walking, and then it was actually our president of the St. Louis board. It was her idea that we put in all the positions, which worked out perfectly with how many of these I made. So I've got the hand walking, and I'm just doing a walk cycle, but on a hand, which was different. So that was that. And then, you know, It's like, what else could hands do? And I'm like, oh, one of my favorite things, the fist bump, you know, pre-COVID fist bump. Awesome. So do that, of course. And I'm like, oh, you know, like when you would play football on the table as a kid. So I was like, okay, I'm going to have one of the hands flick the election. And then I'm like, oh, there could be a nice little thing where like the sporty hand catches it and then tosses it back. And then, yeah, just, you know, fingers tapping, almost like bored, you know, just like waiting, like, all right, this one, we're going to jump back into After Effects and I'm going to explain how I did this one. Because this is one of the questions I got is how did I make the cards fly off screen? All right, let's jump back into After Effects. And that was was that ballot deck? Yeah, ballot deck. Okay. So I have the hand picking up the card. And this was a lot of work because I have a mask, this mat here, that is masking out the hand, the thumb, the corner right there. And it is masking out the thumb, so it looks like the hand is picking it up, and then it's switching to masking out the rest of the hand when it goes into holding it. So this whole like ballot flying away was kind of a happy accident. So all of my ballots are actually also 3D, which is how they are able to move so well, like when it's being picked up. So that way they're all positioned here in the deck, and I had positioned one there and then duplicated them and just moved them up. So this is the first one, and you can see, so I used warp, and while I was using warp, I realized that it did some pretty cool things with this 3D ballot that I then realized I could use to make it look like they're bending and flying away. So I've got this bend and horizontal distortion animated, as well as their position and rotation. And that's what's making them look so fluid while they fly off screen, like a gust of wind just came up and blew all of them away. I mean, when you're holding on a frame, I'm also at half resolution. If I go full, I'll hopefully look better. Like it looks a little pixelated there, but this all happens so fast that it doesn't really matter. But yeah, so that is the general idea of how I achieved this flying away ballots. Let's go back in here, and yeah, so then of course rock, paper, scissors, because you know that's another thing we do with hands. And then this, I am still proud of my zombie hand drag, because this was a really interesting thing to animate. You know, I mimed this one out in front of myself on my desk, and I just laid my whole arm out, and I was just like, how would like a disembodied zombie hand drag itself across the ground? So this is how I achieved that. And then this, I can jump into that scene. Really, it's the same comp being animated over and over again. And everything's linked to a null that's animating the rotation. So, yeah. Yeah, so there's an expression in each comp that, yeah, so that the Z position is being affected by the slider that I added onto the null. So I linked all of them that, and then I just multiplied them. So that's how I got an even spacing. And so if I move the slider around, it'll also, yeah. Yeah, so that's why some of them are further back. That's how I got them all layered out perfectly. And I set it up so that way I could easily adjust if I didn't like the way it looked. And so then in each comp, oops, I'm in the hand. That's not what I wanted. I want one of the ballots. So each ballot, and I had time reverse this. So it starts off with my little smoke kind of bubbly things, and then the ballot just spinning and going up. So that's the ballot box vortex thing, or the ballots vortex. Back over to Premiere. So the hand twitch, and then this is sort of well, it was inspired by Da Vinci's and the creation of Adam, where God is reaching out and Adam is reaching out, in the Sistine Chapel, because another famous hands thing. So that's what inspired this, and I just thought it'd be really cool to have the ballot kind of in there, and then going out and going into the box, and then of course my sporty hand doing the smash down. And then go to the list of all the positions, and then the call to action, which was the link to where you can go and nominate people and vote. It doesn't exist anymore, so you could try to go to that link, but it won't work. And so yeah, I think that covers everything about this project. Oh, one last question was, I was asked what inspired the color palette. Well, AIGA's main color is red, so I knew I wanted to use red, and whenever I'm looking for ideas for anything, I always find references. So I'm going to drag this over and you can see. So this was my references, and a lot of things I found were using like these blues with the red, and I knew I wanted to do stuff with hands, and like this one I really liked the introduction of the yellow, that kind of mustard yellow, and the teal. I thought this was a really great color palette, and you can see a similar kind of here. It's like, so this one is using the red, blue, and teal, and this one's like kind of the same but with the mustard added. So really I kind of stole the color palette from other pieces I saw that was what I was looking for. A lot of times it's kind of hard to just come up with a color palette on your own, just out of nowhere. It's always easier if you have references, and it's like, this is the color palette I like, and I knew I wanted something bold and graphic, and I knew I wanted something kind of wacky. Like, that's why I have all these different color hands. It's not normal colored hands. But yeah, so that's what inspired my color palette, and you can see and those were some hand references, because drawing hands is hard. It is, I'll admit it. I'm still struggling with it in 3D. My hands just always come out looking funny. I'm working on it. But yeah, let me know if you have any other questions in the comments, and I'll answer them. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.